Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters. Show of hands, how many of you are familiar with the MTV reality show, The Real World? All right. Those of you who have your hands up, may recognize that this title of the speech is a riff on the tagline for the show. Find out what happens when people stop being polite and start getting real. This speech is not about people not being polite, but it is about the real world. More specifically, it's about the world that I encountered as a protege, a person being mentored, when I first started working in engineering after I graduated from school. When I first started working for a chemical plant, that would have been 23 years ago, I was assigned an experienced engineer named Dave Nelson to be my mentor. Dave was an excellent mentor to me. He did a few things that you would expect a mentor to do in coaching in terms of getting a new engineer on board. First off, he taught me about some of the chemical equipment around the plant, how they operated. This is actually what Toastmasters would define as coaching instead of mentoring. What Toastmasters calls coaching is short-term, specific skill learning. In this case, in a business situation, it might be that somebody teaches you how to use PowerPoint, the most three important things. They're very specific about it. It doesn't take them a long time to do, and they accomplish it in a short time. Dave did do some coaching for me during this period. However, Dave also did some mentoring for me. The way that Toastmasters defines mentoring is that it's somewhat more long-term. It's general guidance, pushing you in a certain direction, but not laying out exactly the path that you need to do. Most of what he did for his mentoring was teaching me how engineering in industry is different than engineering in school. We have a few engineers in the room, so they might know a little bit about this. Engineering in school sometimes focuses on idealized situations. You have a frictionless surface here, or you have an incompressible fluid there. And a lot of times it also focuses on precision, taking things out to the fifth decimal point. In the real world, in engineering after school, Dave taught me that you can't always achieve these things. You can't always get these ideal situations. And more importantly, sometimes you shouldn't really try, because it's a waste of time to try to get that precise for situations that can't be categorized as that precise. There were three categories in which he told me how things were different than engineering schools: money, time, and communication. There's this one project that I had that I think covers all that. It's a project that I had that sounds conceptually pretty easy, which is replacing furnace tubes. We had 4 furnace tubes that were old. We needed to pull them out. We needed to take the spare set and put them in. And we had 4 days in which to do all of this. Now, the previous times that had been done before, it had always taken 7 days. Time frame was a bit compressed. First thing that Dave taught me in his mentoring was about money. He said, when you figure out how much money you think it's going to cost to do this, be sure you add some more to that amount. 10, 15% might be a good idea, but I'll let you choose what it is that you think you need to do. This project is already going to be expensive. We're going to compress it in a shorter time frame than it's been done before, so we're going to be paying people extra money to work overtime. We're going to have bigger crews. Having a little bit extra, that 10% or whatever it is you choose to do, is going to be helpful. Now, first I approach this as, that's lying. I know how much this is going to take. I know that this is what's going to be involved in. I asked people what it's going to cost, and this is the number. We can't lie. And he said, you're not lying. Something is going to come up that you did not foresee. For sure. This happens with every project. And if you don't ask for that money up front, then you're going to have to try to ask for it on the back work that you have to do to try to get that extra money is going to be more time than the 4 days that you have. You need to ask for extra money. He did give you a little freedom for interpretation in this. He didn't say, you have to ask for this percentage, you have to ask for this more. He just said, you have to ask for more and figure out how much more you need to do. So that's a good mentor. He gave you a little bit of guidance on that, but not strict interpretation. The second thing Dave mentored me on was time. He said, okay, you've got 4 days to do the project, but you have a number of weeks leading into the project that effectively, if you use it, will expand the amount of time that you have for the project. You don't want to give that planning just a cursory look. You want to spend a lot of time thinking, what if, what if, what if? Because if you don't have that time to react during those 4 days for the project. And it's very fortunate they asked me to do that, because when I looked at the tubes that we were going to use to replace it, and they were supposed to be like for like, they weren't like for like. It wasn't going to be drag and drop. And I had to figure out how to compensate for the fact that the spare tubes weren't like the old tubes I was replacing. It probably took me a good week to figure out how I was going to compensate for that. And boy, last time I checked, a week is longer than 4 days, and I wouldn't have had that week of time if I hadn't looked in advance the way he had cautioned me to do. The last thing that Dave coached me about was communication and how it's different in the real world versus school. He said, okay, in school, you're given a problem set, it's due in a week. The professor doesn't really care what you're doing in that week as long as you turn in that problem set at the end of the week. But this is a really big project, and people are going to care how it's being done as it's being done. You need to give constant updates on this important project. And the way that I interpreted that is, when I'm in the planning stages, I'm going to give weekly updates. And when we're in the execution phase, I'm going to give daily updates. And that seemed to appease everybody, because it was a lot of money we were throwing at this project, and they could appreciate what was going on as it was happening. So those three things, money, time, and communication, were how Dave mentored me. And it's really a good example of how Toastmasters likes you to look at mentoring. He gave me this kind of guidance over the course of a year. And it's long-term general guidance that he gave. That's what Toastmasters views as mentoring. Regular feedback he gave me. And he still gave me the freedom to interpret a little bit how I wanted to execute on his guidance. He didn't make it so specific that I couldn't learn from it. That's what Toastmasters views as mentoring. Mr. Toastmaster.
Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, and of course, Albert. First off, I would like to say, wonderful speech. I'll admit, when I was writing things down, I found a lot of things you excelled at, and I had difficulty thinking of things that were not so good. To start with the things that you excelled at, interesting introduction. Unfortunately, I did not get to hear all of it, as I had to get something from my brother. However, when I did hear of it, it had an interesting hook. While the hook was a little bit tangential to the speech, I think it was enough to draw the audience in. Another thing that I liked is that you clearly defined mentoring as was noted in the purpose of the speech. It says here that it should not be a report on the content of Introduction to Toastmasters Mentoring Project. And I think you managed to define mentoring without going into that area. That is, you didn't just give a report on it, you managed to give your knowledge of the protege and managed to work it in. You had good gestures, such as when you talked about how you had a short time period and how you idealized it. Now sometimes you did not have an idealized situation of an incompressible liquid. And I also thought simply the example you gave of your mentor was very good. From what it sounds like, he was an amazing mentor that exemplified what a mentor was. There were a couple of things I thought you could work on. One is maybe I just didn't pay attention, but I didn't hear all that much volume change. I think that maybe you could use the volume change a little more, and then possibly use that to your advantage. Another thing I made note of is your speech, while it was definitely an amazing example of a good mentor, I noticed it was more of the lessons that you learned as a protege than it was on being a protege. Now don't get me wrong, it does say that it should be sharing some aspect of a previous experience as a protege, and you did that. But I feel that in some ways you focus more on the engineering lessons you learned and the experience of the protege. I don't know whether that's good or bad. That is one thing that I noted. As to challenge yourself, I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I had difficulty thinking of things that you should work on. I suppose the only thing I could think of is, as I said, more volume change. Thank you.